Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us in this what will be an amazing conversation. Excited to kick off this virtual South by Southwest EDU. I actually have on one of my vintage shirts, not sure what year it's from, but I'm so excited to be back in the fold this year. I am Naomi Shelton, the CEO of the National Charter Collaborative. We represent and work with a network of more than 450 Black, Brown, and Indigenous school leaders who run single-site charters throughout the country. I'm so glad that this opportunity to have a conversation about building community, what it takes to strengthen the pipeline to Black teachers joining the teaching force. But I also am excited to have and do a deep dive in what it means to really build community, to make sure that in this space and place and meeting the moment of the racial reckoning, we're being very thoughtful about what it means to bring Black people into schools. So you all may know, and while this wasn't always the case, by and large, the teaching profession is seen as a woman's work. There are only 2% of the teaching force are Black men, and that's a problem. We know that 2% is systematic barriers that are keeping men from the classroom, but we also know research has shown that having a Black teacher can change the trajectory of a single student's life. So today we have three amazing Black educators, ranging from Sharif El-Mekki, who out of Philadelphia has been rocking and rolling and making sure that Black men know that teaching is a profession that they can really dig into. We have Curtis Valentine, who is not only an administrator in terms of his work in Prince George's County as a school board member, but also has been running this fabulous campaign around Real Men Teach. And then Ray Ankrum, who of course is like a brother to me. He's the four of the 8 Black hands, or I have 4 of the 8 Black hands here today, and Ray is 2 of them. So all of that to say, we're excited to talk about what it means to bring brothers into the fold. How do we expand that community and be really thoughtful about what that looks like? So Black men, we're going to do a really quick round robin and whip around, and you all tell me, starting off with Curtis, if you could tell me more about what was a pivotal moment for you and what brought you into the teaching profession. I would love to hear just what brings you to this work.
Thank you so much, Naomi, for having me today and to be on a great panel with these 2 brothers. Real Men Teach is really what it is. It's the idea of us bringing back the idea that men in our community are supposed to be standing guard and ensuring that every child in our community feels covered and that there are lessons to be taught in every aspect of our community. When I think about the idea of Real Men Teach, and people say, well, Curtis, how did this come about so quickly? I say, well, we've been doing this work for over 7 years. And as the old adage goes, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. But if I was honest with you, this goes back years ago. When I first started, like a lot of you, entering into the first schoolhouse, imaging myself in this space and understanding there were men who I looked up to literally that I thought I could be like one day. And so when I think about particularly men like Carl Wade, who was my middle school principal, he was the walking example of what I saw leadership was in the school building, respect was in the community, and just a passion for young people. Sadly, he was only one of 3 Black men I had in education growing up. And so the Real Men Teach campaign is to change that narrative and change the demographic for children moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Ray, Reef, I'll let you all fight out who's going to bring it to us next. But could you tell us about either a Black male teacher or what brought you to the work that you do in the education space?
All right. I can just jump in. I think 2 men think, when I think about my career, I think about 2 men. One, Baba Changa, who was my elementary school teacher. And while we didn't really talk about me becoming a K-12 educator, he did, give me so many leadership opportunities. He would actually talk about like, oh, you need to open up a martial arts school one day, that type of teaching. But he was like my favorite teacher of all time. Like, we just, even as an adult, he played a pivotal role. He was a mentor. He was a teacher. He taught us political science. So he was a significant part of my political education. And then later, when I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, it was Dr. Martin Ryder, a Black man in the school district of Philadelphia, that said, hey, young man, the activism that you want to be a part of, there's no pure form of activism than teaching well, leading a classroom well, that's full of Black children. And so he was really a pivotal, part of the decision making to say, okay, you know what, I actually want to become a Black man by a blackboard. We had blackboards back then. I don't know if Ray and Curtis know what that is. You either, Naomi, but back then it was a Black men by blackboards. So that was those two men had a tremendous impact on me.
And Ray, bringing in the rear gear, I'd love to hear, especially because you are a part of a fraternity, and that community is really strong in terms of pushing academia. Tell us more about either an experience with a Black male teacher or your community, and how that led you to the work that you do now.
Sure. So for me, my first Black male teacher was in 6th grade. It was my science teacher, Mr. Jimmy James McGee. He also used to go to a church that I frequented as well, and just his love for his subject matter, right? Because like when you're thinking about science, at least for me then, I didn't really think that like Black folks could gravitate towards that. And so seeing his passion with regards to like how serious he took his approach to science, I learned so much from him. He had gotten sick that year, and so he only taught a half year before he resigned. I'm sorry, not resigned, before he retired, actually. And then Miss Thomas took over, who was a sister from the neighborhood, a member of the D9. She's a AKA a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. And so my life has been filled with Black educators, not necessarily men. But one man that really stuck out to me in terms of the work wasn't even what I say a certified teacher. He was a substitute teacher. He was a trained musician in life. And then he had came in after the fact and was substituting after his career was over. And he used to pull me to the side and he's like, "Listen, I see really good things in you, bro. You don't limit yourself by the people that you surround yourself with. You can go far. Education can take you far." And just lessons like that from educators. And then thinking about folks beyond the classroom and beyond the school, like people in my neighborhood, like Mr. Bo Elsie, who was my basketball coach. Well, actually, he wasn't my basketball coach. I was on another team that used to beat his team all the time. But he took an interest in me. But people in the neighborhood taking interest in young Black men, that's what's going to get us to the finish line.
That's right. And in building that community, the teaching field is a community within itself. And with the limited number of Black men who are in that space that are able to actually flourish as teachers and not just be seen as administrators that are there to, police students' behavior, et cetera, how do we get to a different place? And so in preparing for this and in working in this space for a while, and wanting to think about how do you increase the number of Black and brown folks that are going into the teacher profession, I came across the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, and they have identified 5 core propositions to really professionalize what teachers should know and be able to do. And that is a part of their certification process. So that people that go the traditional route go through school, they have that whole experience, but then they go into classrooms and often say that they are not prepared for what they have to experience. And so the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards kind of reinforces or is like that extra certification. And those standards are very simple. So teachers are committed to students and their learning. Teachers know the subjects they teach and how to teach the subjects to students. They are responsible for managing and monitoring student learning, think systematically about their practice and learn from experience, and are members of learning communities. And so to me, all of these seem like second nature for the professionals that I know and the teachers that I come in contact with through my authorizing role for charters here in DC, but in other times where I visited schools. And so Ray, you run a school district. Yep. And I'd love, I'm sure that these seem like second nature to you as well, but what are the ways that effective Black teachers and educators, specifically Black men, can codify their work to set standards for what teaching Black and brown students, what that should look like? What are the propositions, the core ideology that we should be thinking of when it comes to teaching? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Multi-layered. but definitely thoughtful. So thank you for that question, Naomi. So from what I've seen from the success that Black and brown teachers have in terms of how they approach the work, it's not really measured. It's kind of like, all right, well, I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna build connections with students, and I'm gonna push them. But it's the factors that we don't necessarily talk about, the factors that aren't measured in the scholarship. So like if you go to the scholarship right now and you're like, all right, well, what do Black teachers do that's different from all other teachers? It's not really captured. And so my dissertation, I don't mean to plug my dissertation here, but just saying, uh, is talking about parent engagement in urban charter schools through the lens of Black male school leaders. And so what we're seeing is that there are certain things that we do that isn't accounted for in terms of like how we build relationships with students, how we build relationships with parents, right? And so if you go to a Black leader and you're like, hey, well, what do you do? What's the secret sauce? I can't really tell you what the secret sauce is because it's just how I show up, right? And you spoke before about the limited amount of Black male educators. You guys put it at 2%. It's less than 2%. It's about 1.8%, and it's actually dwindling as we speak. So we definitely got a lot of work to do. But my dissertation is going to try to capture some of that secret sauce and put it out in scholarship. So thanks for the question.
No, thank you. And thank you for the work in terms of even that being your dissertation and having that codified, having that idea of like the community building is like that unspoken language that you not only experience, but now that you are in the role as a school superintendent of a network of schools, that you have to kind of build that into how your teaching force, how they operate. So thank you for that. Now, Sharif, you have just launched an amazing project, multi-million-dollar pipeline development for Black teachers. I would love for you to just to dig into that a little bit, but also, why are we, in the space and place of people being contrarian? Why does this matter? And what are we trying to solve? And who are we trying to solve this issue for? And who's responsible for solving the issue of the lack of Black teachers, specifically Black males in the teaching space?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah, we at the Center for Black Educator Development, we have been really thinking about the work, but not just in siloed efforts. I think too many aspects of education is siloed. And we look at it as really a 12-year pipeline. And I think one of the things that we have to really work hard at is to challenge the notion that, to get Black teachers, let's start talking to college graduates, or let's start talking to career changers only. Like it needs to be really a multifaceted effort. It's everyone's responsibility, both community, both educators, legacy civil rights organizations, nonprofits, city government, state, local, like all of it. Everyone's responsible, because you can see that, one, there were specific things, policies that impacted the dearth of Black educators, and particularly Black men, whether it's their experiences in school that make it, really unfathomable for many of them to return to lead a classroom when they said, I have such miserable experiences and memories in that space. I don't even want to drive down my school street, let alone come work there and commit years of my life to that situation. But I also think it's educators, right? How are we ensuring, like Dr. Martin Ryder did for me, how am I making sure that happens? We recently did a Black Educator Hall of Fame and just tried to choose 28, 29 historic Black educators, and Mary Church Terrell talked about lift as you climb. And that still resonates, lift as you climb, become the vanguard that you needed, consider becoming the teacher you wish you had and knew you needed, even if it was a negative experience. So this Black teacher pipeline that we launched is 12 years. We're just getting started. We have a lot of money to raise. We're grateful to be able to at least get in the starting blocks and start envisioning what would a Black teacher pipeline look across the country, particularly choosing 10 cities that we can go deeper in as the center and provide clinical experiences for students. Our city of Philly, like many places, if you're a high school student and you're interested in the arts, music, architecture, science, STEM, like there are programs for you. But if you're interested in teaching, a lot of times people say, "Oh, why don't you come babysit?" You know, you like kids, and so we need to be able to provide them clinical experiences, a paycheck, as well as support as far as like what are the mindset, art, and skills of being a dope teacher.
Awesome. And so with any strong campaign or any deliberate effort, you need a strong campaign to wrap around that. And it needs to be multifaceted. I know that there are tons of localized versions of this work. I think Profound Gentlemen, and I'm trying to think through all of the ones that we've heard of over time. But it's also, when you have something that's viral, there's something that just pops, how that can really spark conversation and have people connecting dots that hadn't existed before. Thinking about who do we qualify as an educator, right? The movie Soul that came out last year. Was that earlier this year, because time is not real at this point. And thinking about Joe and his experience of being a substitute teacher.
I was Ray's substitute teacher.
Hey.
Actually, I mean, do we know, was he fashioned after, the woman that you worked with, right? And thinking about that, like, Curtis, you've kicked off this amazing campaign with Real Men Teach. If you search the hashtag, I get excited about seeing the new who has on the hoodie this week, right? And so I would love for you to share with us. You're amplifying this for a reason. We've talked about the reason, but I would love for you to just tell us the motivation behind Real Men Teach, and then what the response has been so far. And have people that normally wouldn't have addressed this or thought about it in that way, but because it is, somewhat of a viral sensation, that it's piquing interest in folks who hadn't thought about it before.
Yeah, I mean, the motivation is really the old adage that images matter and narratives matter. And if they didn't matter, they wouldn't be used every day to justify policies that subjugate and promote white supremacy in our community. And so the idea that, Black men are this or Black women are that, are ideas that over generation after generation have been fed to us. In many ways, we digest them and then we push them out. Going back to Birth of a Nation and all the images that have been put upon us from those who understood the power of narratives, to the statues that have been built after the Confederacy fell. And a lot of this conversation around what happened in Charlottesville around these Confederate flag and these monuments matter, images matter. And so when I got into this work, particularly as a member of the Board of Education where I live and others, and we're talking about recruiting and retaining more male educators, I understood, one, we had a morale problem around, again, men feeling valued in the building. When I joined the school board here, I was the only member of the school board who had ever taught in the school system. And I brought my experience as a male educator, and it's understanding the image and what they thought male educators were supposed to be. I'm walking in fresh, and so I'm really kind of filling in to what an image of what they told me I should be doing. But that image was based on, their historical references to what male educators were. And in many cases that we talk about oftentimes, that is a limited pool. And so what Real Men Teach right now is our ability to define it in our own image. What does it mean to be a teacher? And so on a daily basis, right now, we're in our Real Men Teach 100 campaign. And over 100 days, and we have so many men, you asked about the response, it's going to end up being Real Men Teach 365. Because we have men sending me pictures on a daily basis saying, here I am, I'm seen, see me for who I am. And when I saw previous campaigns, I saw sort of images of men wearing certain apparel, but you didn't know their names. You didn't know who they were. And I said, no, there's someone behind that. There's more to this person. Is he a father? Is he a mentor? What are his hobbies? Where do you go to school? What does he care about? And so we put their names right out front. And you'll be surprised the amount of people who reach out to me and say, Curtis, you know what? I don't do it for the recognition, but it damn sure feels good to be recognized. Because we do this, we do this because we know it needs to be done. But like a lot of things, the work goes to the ones who are already doing most of the work. Ray and Sharif will tell you, the three of us are getting all the phone calls, right? But we're like, hold on, there's a lot more work out there. And there are brothers who are saying, Kurt, hey man, you just let me know what needs to be done and I'll do it. And so our campaign is really to define what it means, but also, proceeds from the apparel are going to go to scholarships to ensure that there's no amount of money that's going to keep a brother from being in the classroom. Because I'm having conversations about brothers anywhere between $500, $1,000, $1,500 and keeping them from graduating, from getting their transcripts in order to get a job, from being able to hire a tutor for a practice in order to stay in the classroom. And I'm saying, you telling me this black man, this Latino man is and all the students and all the parents and all the people who count on this person is going to be separated from this school over $500, over $1,000, and a seed that will be planted in all his students to say, you know what, when I was in the 5th grade, I had Mr. Ankrum. Oh my God, he's the reason why I teach. The narrative could have been, well, Ray Ankrum had to leave after 3 weeks or and that student never got that experience to be able to have that, to plant the seed so that when my man Sharif shows up, they're able to say, you thought about being a teacher? You know what? I have. I had an amazing teacher named Mr. Ankrum. I want to be like him. And so now I want to get into the pipeline. And so I think everything we're doing, the three brothers are doing, we're all part of a continuum. We're really not stepping on each other's toes, but we kind of come in as Avengers with our own skill set and support one another, filling gaps to ensure that we have the entire pipeline, the entire ecosystem covered.
Right. And you all are doing, because it is a pie, right? And there are different slices of this that we have to take into consideration. Ray, you do this work day in and day out in terms of having to coach teachers, having to make sure that you're, managing operations, doing all these things, and thinking about all of the work, because we're now in a virtual space, it's almost like as if it's easier for us to connect. It's easier for us to find the synergies. It's easier to connect the dots that hadn't been there before. I know when I joined UNCF several years ago, I sat down and said to my then boss and dear friend, Sekou Biddle, who is also a graduate of Morehouse College, so yes to the house, said to him, I recognize that there's an issue that people have with Teach for America, right? They have an inherent just knee-jerk reaction of, I don't like it. And I said, so Sekou, how do we create a Black TFA? How do we create a Black pipeline directly from the colleges that UNCF works with, along with other HBCUs? And as I think about that, Reef, you are doing it, and I am so thankful, so glad that is happening. But from the ways that you and Ray have had to approach your work, you know that everybody's not cut out for the classroom. So how do you encourage folks to come into the work? How do you encourage people to stay? And how do you think about this in terms of like, who's cut out for this work and who is not? And however y'all want to play it out in terms of who goes first, because again, y'all do this every week on 8 Black Hands. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I'm gonna go first. The first thing that I'm gonna say is I'm not anti-TFA at all. TFA is my friend.
Wow.
And I will let me add a quick footnote.
Little plug there.
So
really quickly, Ray, let me add a footnote to that and just say that TFA actually has a significant a portion of the people of color that have come into the teaching force because it's a non-traditional pathway. Absolutely. It's the brand that is an issue for people, but the Black people that I know that have been involved in TFA are still connected to education. So right. Continue on.
So yeah, I'm not even really getting into the whole branding thing, but what I will say is that, there's a difference between approaching the work through the traditional route and then approaching the work through a non-traditional route. And for the last 12 years of leadership, for me, I've had better experience from the folks that have not gone the traditional route, because I feel like you can pour more into folks that just haven't been brainwashed by the university system. And that's my own perspective. That's my own, that's just me, right? So like, that's why I'm not anti-TFA. I'm not anti-traditional route. I just want folks that's going to come in and love Black kids and love all the kids that they're working with and approach the work in that manner. I mean, from what I've seen though, from the folks that have the most success are the people that are, first of all, you got to want to be successful. right? Like you have to approach the work and want to be successful. And then like you have to be coachable, right? So like, you can't know everything, right? You gotta, those folks that are like, Mr. Ankrum, can you come into my classroom, please? Come into my classroom in order to give me feedback, right? Not just waiting for me to get there, but like, kind of soliciting, the fact that, hey, listen, I know that you were a good teacher when you were in the classroom and I want to be better. You can't really coach that. You can't coach people you can't coach that kind of spirit in people for them to naturally want to be better, right? But it takes you to the hiring process. Like you got to know who you hiring. You got to know who you putting in front of these kids. And so for me, I think about every hire. I'm very strategic about every hire that I make. I make the hire thinking that if this person is going to be if this person is good enough to be in front of my daughter, right? Mm-hmm. And so I personalize it because I know the love that I have for her. I have to have that same love for every student that's in my building. And so I want every student to have the best educator that they could possibly have, because we all know that, if you get a really bad teacher, that can undo learning, right? And make kids not want to come to school. And so, it's being intentional on our hiring and then hiring the right people and then pouring into those people that you hire.
Okay.
Yeah, those are all like, really great points. I think, and teaching is one of the few professions like where you're really needed to perform at a high level on day one, whatever that first day of school. And that's why I'm a huge fan of great residencies, where, and clinical experiences before you get in there. Unfortunately, a lot of teacher colleges, you don't even have your student teaching experience to the second semester of your senior year. That's really late to get into the game and start seeing like, okay, one, am I the right fit? Do I have the right mindset? And being able to interrogate your biases is one thing. We got a whole lot of folks that talk about, use the rhetoric of interrogating biases and being woke and all that kind of stuff as you're reading a book or in a book club. It's very different when you feel like, hey, you know what? Like I'm actually, I felt emotion when a child or student did that or said that, and then what's your level of wokeness, right? And so we have to understand that it takes, one practice to really interrogate, our biases. And what Ray talked about, like hiring well. I say this a lot. Like you can't fire your way to greatness. You can hire well. You can coach well, but just, if you're waiting until you hired someone to then like, they're like, oh, wait a minute, this person actually doesn't like kids. And, that's unfortunate. I remember my first year teaching and the teacher told me, I thought she was joking. I was naive. I was 22 years old. And she was like, no, this is a job for me. I don't like these little, you know what I mean? And I was just like, whoa, how in the world did you become a teacher? I couldn't even fathom it. But I think, when you talk about the teacher prep, that's why it's so important. Mindset, skill, and will. Yep. I had my druthers, new teachers. Before you became a teacher, you would have different experiences in the community, because we know a whole lot of folks, their only experience with Black and brown children are in schools, and we also have to recognize, if they're Black teachers, like we have to push and challenge and support them so they can see like, wait a minute, have you internalized racism much? Mm-hmm. How does it manifest itself? What is it a class issue? Have your family for generations actually moved away from the inner city or from these communities that may be impoverished, and now you're coming back to teach? Like, what have you ingested, as Dr. Tatum talks about? Have you ingested the smog of racism, and how does that manifest in your instructional decision making? So we all have to continue to do the work, and it's a continuum. And I think that's why it's so important to have consistent feedback, both from coaches, colleagues, supervisors, but also students and parents. Like they are critical for helping us, really see that mirror, and getting the feedback about how we're showing up and how children are experiencing our teaching, our decision making, and our presence.
That's right. Of course, now that you've mentioned that, I want to go into a complete rabbit hole around some of the problematic ways that folks in the profession show up. But I want us to be asset based. I want us to focus on the good things so that we're not, leaning into the bad. But I think I will ask a question about that later. But Curtis, I'll start with you. Like, what is it that we are trying to cultivate or account for in encouraging men, Black men, to enter the teaching profession?
Well, I mean, I always say that there's teaching happening every day all around us. And I think we look at teaching, particularly as it relates to, Sharif and his blackboard and someone standing in front of a room and a room full of 20 kids at desks talking to them, sort of this regurgitation, this sort of a lesson, maybe a demonstration, and then an assessment. But pretty much the Real Men Teach campaign is saying, you know what? Think about the best lessons you learned in life or the skills that you have. How many of those skills did you learn in a classroom, or did you learn out in the community, in a church, in a barbershop, on a basketball court? And really just sort of understanding that literally anybody can teach, but not everybody should teach.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say that again. Anybody can teach, but everybody should teach. Now, what do you mean by that? If you're a father and you taught your daughter how to tie her shoe, or you taught your son how to ride a bike, there are processes. Someone can step back and look at every step you took in order to go from looking at the bike to getting them to going down the road. And a lot of those lessons can be extrapolated over different subjects. But I think what we're seeing is really people being discouraged or just sort of fit into this traditional way of what a teacher looks like and how they teach, which is sort of us recycling this over and over and over again. And people like, I call him my brother Chris Emden, talks about this idea of us, the good sheep that sort of came through these systems that destroy people. We made it out. And now all we're doing is sort of replicating the very system that destroyed all the homies. But we got through. And so we're saying, since we're the exemplar, you all should be able to get it too. So let's, so a lot of this, we have to deconstruct all. And that's why brothers like Ray starting his own school is so important, because we can, again, create it in our own image. And so when I think about, particularly, Black male educators, I don't want, and this is going to make news, I don't want anybody going into teaching because they say they need more Black teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Like that shouldn't be the motivation. I'm from the school of thought, like, don't ask what the world needs. Do what makes you come alive. Because what the world needs is people that come alive.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to find that thing, because everyone has a skill. And you could teach that skill because you understand this thing makes you come, whether it's cooking,
that's right,
mechanics, barbering, architecture, philosophy, physics, thermodynamics, astrophysics, whatever that thing is that makes you come alive, that, what can you talk about for 5 minutes without stopping in order to get the $1 million prize you see on social media, whatever that thing is. Mm-hmm. How do you bring that to a classroom? Because students are going to respond. Like when you see you come in and they see you hyped, they're like, oh my God, I don't know what he's talking about. But I'm trying to be like this dude. He is too live.
That's right.
Versus, your yeah, I mean, you may know your work. You may be the best physicist in the world. You walk in that classroom, you say, turn to page 5. Mr. Johnson, can you please read from the top of page 1? And you're wondering, hold on, we had a great teacher. He had all the certifications and he knew all the stuff. But the students are like, bro, are you serious? This is the brother who's going to try to teach me how to do this? To the point where I don't want to go into physics no more. Now I just want to do something, there are people who have stolen our gifts and children who wanted to do certain, and educators who have turned them off to that. And so you can see the energy I have, because I understand my students where I teaching at the college level, I come to class just like this. And they know they're going to come in and I'm be like, yo, exactly. I'm from Jersey. Yo, we need to have people come alive. But it takes, again, campaigns and communities of men and women to give other men permission to be their full selves, because only that way will you have students who want to replicate that and go into that field.
That's right. And so, of course, just having been in this space, there are different efforts. There are things that are happening and churning, and BNOLA, so Black Educators for New Orleans, an amazing organization based out of New Orleans, was born out of the shift in the education landscape in that city post Katrina. And so they conducted a study, and when you read and really peel through that study, I've only had a handful of bodies of research that have either caused my jaw to drop, have triggered something in terms of light bulb, or that have just disgusted me. I'm not going to talk about the ones that have disgusted me, but I'll lean in on this Black brilliance research that they've kind of brought together. But I'm also going to pair that with the Norman C. Francis teacher pipeline work that the Xavier University of Louisiana has created. And there were some things within this study, within the Black Brilliance study, that just really warmed my heart. And just, again, what we've lost in having this disconnect in terms of our community. One of the things that was highlighted in the executive summary of that Black Brilliance report, I encourage people who are watching to go to BNOLA's website to download that report. But one of the things that a theme that came up was that Black educators in this study talked about they feel betrayed by other Black educators. And how that impacted just what the landscape of education looked like. So they summed it up by saying that some of the study participants talked explicitly about the experiences with Black educators who assimilated and aligned with whitewashed leadership and education agendas, often from their own perspective, just to get ahead professionally. And that in doing so, these educators often mistreated Black educators and just were not being thoughtful about building that community, right? And creating a space and place for all of us to thrive, because at the end of the day, there aren't that many Black teachers in this space. And so what are the ways that the three of you, and each of you can answer this in the order that you'd like, but what are the ways that you're really stoking community? Reef, I know if you have money to build a pipeline, your job right now is to build a community. But what are some of the other ways that you've been able to do that over the span of your career? And then for Ray and for Curtis, in terms of building community and making sure that you're not aligning to a set of practices that haven't really shown up well for the outcomes for students, what are the ways that you've built community?
Yeah, I mean, I think that study is really important, and I think it speaks to, folks who may, and it all comes back to mindset, Naomi. Like this idea of you enter a field for one thing, maybe you looked at yourself as a liberator, and at some point you became a gatekeeper. At some point, I say this often, that everybody doesn't want to end white supremacy. There are many folks who just want to improve their position within it. And, Schoolhouse is no different. And so I think one of the things that we've, really tried to do both as a principal, when I was inside of a school as well as the center, is really ensure that like our professional learning communities, our professional development is intentional, that is dealing with the mindset, is dealing with the the ways that we think about community. And I've had the blessing of always working within community of others, as we do this space. And I think it's been really informative. And so I think like when we have these 20 competencies and insights that we provide professional development, around, and this is for both aspiring educators, high school students, college students, veteran educators, district staff, and leaders, right? Like, and we're thinking about, okay, how do we help people really understand what cultural humility is, or, critical consciousness? How does it manifest itself in your interactions? And I think this is why that feedback is so important. So people can understand, this is how I show up. This is how other people feel. This is the impact that I'm having on our others. And it can't just be on racial lines. It has to be amongst colleagues and peers, so that we all understand and get this ongoing feedback of this is what it means. And that contemplative consciousness, like, how you see and understand and how your mind and spirit works, as a teacher, as an educator, what does servant leadership look like? What is your philosophy? And your practices, that enrich the lives of others, students, families, colleagues, people that you're supervising, another. And at the end of the day, you have to have moral courage. You have to understand, like, oh, this is the system. And, to also quote, Dr. Emden is like, you're going to do damage you choose to do damage to the system or damage to kids. You make the choice as an educator, and damage to kids sometimes is indirectly. Sometimes it is to the colleagues or other educators of those same children, and you're damaging them, you're wounding them, and then expecting them to be able to perform at the optimal level. So we have to have a level of humility as we come into this space, and also recognize what how pervasive white supremacy is and how dense the smog is that everyone is breathing.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, I would add, these classrooms and, again, to Sheree's point, how people show up is a function of sort of the environment in which a school leader like Ray is at creating that enabling environment for that person to bring their full selves. I remember when I was telling someone earlier today that when I became a teacher, I was a middle school teacher here. I said they wanted a black male teacher. Mm-hmm. They didn't want Curtis Valentine. Like, Curtis Valentine is a person. I'm a soul. I have proclivities. I have tendencies. I have all those things. But if we're solely looking out just for black male teachers, you'll find one. But in the end, you're gonna look back and say, well, there's something we missed here. And so, particularly our campaign and a lot of the work, I think, as you're marketing and communicating, we have to understand that we're not just going to target potential educators or current educators. We have to also target the ecosystem in which they walk in every day, and it incorporates the school leaders, policymakers like myself, superintendents, fellow members of the staff, the parents who are also sort of creating this system of affirming, challenging, holding them accountable, but also understanding that this person has my child in front of them, hour a day, 5 days a week. And what they bring is also going to impact and touch on how my child sees her or herself in the world. And so, we create community. So this idea of celebrating men on a daily basis, which we're doing now, started 7 years ago when we started doing our Male Educator Network Awards here in Prince George's County, Maryland. We honored 200 male educators and 200 fathers every year. So we were honoring 400 men for 7 years, even before we started this campaign. And we brought out the fraternities, and we brought out the Kappas and the Omegas, and so we would line the stage. And so we had 20 Omegas shaking every father's hand, every educator's hand, and saying, wow, I'm on stage for the first time because I maybe didn't have this graduation day moment. But the community is saying, I have your back. I'm standing with you. I'm a resource to you. But also here, I'm telling you that you also stand with me as a gatekeeper to our community, saying we are not going to take any of that mess because we stand guard on our children. So these campaigns have to be holistic. They have to challenge systems. And I think to the point we're talking about is it's going to be systems are children. Systems are our future. We know what backing systems look like already, and we know the impact it's had on us. We have to look back. We have to challenge that system and say, you know what, that ends with me. We have the power in us to do it. We have to have the courage to do it as well.
That's right. Ray, and of course, I'm going to have to say something about, do you have to throw up the hooks, really? But go ahead. Tell us about how you've built community. I want to hear it.
We're always going to throw up the hooks in every event that I'm in.
Oh, I didn't know there was a name for that, Naomi. Oh, thank you.
Y'all can talk about it.
This guy. All right, so I think for me, personally, I live by a certain code. And so I will not have that code interrupted regardless of whatever work atmosphere I'm in. And so it's about you, and it's about how you show up. And I'm inclined to want to be in environments where I can show up as my authentic self. And if I'm not in an environment where I can show up as my authentic self, I'm at a space in my career to where that's not for me, because not everything is for everybody. And so in instances in which I felt like I could not show up as my authentic self, I bucked the system. Like, you have to. Like, you can't just you can't just, I'm not going to show up and conform because, for the sake of conforming. Hell no. That's not what we want to teach our kids to do. We want to keep because I'm not quoting who they quoted. I'm going to quote Chris Stewart. That's who I'll quote. We got to raise troublemakers, right? We got to raise troublemakers and make sure that they are able to show up and make trouble for this system, because at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want good troublemakers.
That's right.
But in terms of just like this whole idea of being in my position, man, I try to hire as many qualified Black people as I can. I've been burned many times for making that decision, because I don't make the decision just based off of the fact that they're Black. I make sure that I make the decision based on the fact that they're qualified. But then you never know how a person is going to show up, right? And so if they come to work and they show up different than what the expectations were or how they presented themselves in the interview process or whatever, it's kind of heartbreaking, right? Because like you see them, you're like, yo, it's so much value that could have been had from this particular situation, right? And it's happened to me a couple of times with Black men, so much to the point to where I'm like, man, I'm just not hiring. No, and I got to go and I got to self-reflect and I got to think to myself, I'm like, damn, well, what if somebody took that attitude towards me or whatever, then where would I be right now? And so it takes me about 5 minutes to get back in control of my feelings, but it's heartbreaking when people don't show up the way that you think or know that they can, or because my bar is high for students, but my bar is also high for the educators that are with the students.
Ray, can I bring up something Ray said about particularly the interview process? And this is something for those who are listening in and they're trying to find their way into this space, like what value I can add. One of the projects we did with our male educator network here in Prince George's County, Maryland, with the 20th largest district in the country, but we also have the largest percentage of male educators of color in the DC metro area. And we had men who were trying to get into leadership positions. They were classroom teachers and they wanted to become in leadership positions, but they were interviewing and were not getting the roles and not getting hired, to Ray's point. I spoke with someone from the HR department and they asked me the name of the person. And they said, oh, Curtis. And they went down the line of everything he had done wrong in the interview. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, how can we, a community of brothers, be of support to brothers like him? Because clearly he's not, unique in this space. And so we started doing something called interviewing one-on-one workshops, but it was all done by other male educators that we can. And so we were able to kind of have these very, very concrete conversations with them about the interviewing process and do mock interviews. And lo and behold, a year later, brothers were getting jobs. They were coming back with testimonies. And we could have come and say, you know what? Only the best, go back, brother, and get it done. But we say, you know what? Again, we're a community. You asked about, how do we bring this together? We can support brothers because those brothers, they may not show up well in the interview. They may not present well in a certain environment. But those men have gone on and done amazing work and supported our children. But we have to sort of meet the needs where they are. And in this case, it was in the interview process. In other cases, it will be other spaces in the school building. But that's the way to be constructive and supportive of the brothers as we're trying to get them in, through, and to thrive in our school systems.
I don't mean to blow you up, Nate, but I'm taking issue with the fact that, they couldn't show up the way that they show up and still be able to get a job. Like, I take issue with that. Mm-hmm. Right.
No, and
go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm gonna say this. So I'm married to a woman educator, right? And so what we were saying is the sisters were showing up in that spot. And so it's not like, to your point, we're gonna say we're gonna give this brother the benefit of the doubt because he didn't show up the way he could. The brother said, in many ways, I really don't want the handout. Show me what I'm doing wrong, because I can. And he did. They were like, this is all voluntary. And they sat down and listened. And they had brothers like you and Sharif come down and say, hey, bro, let me just ask you something. Can you answer that question a little better? Let's start it this way. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at your resume. How come you didn't mention this on your resume? Well, I don't think that's important. Bruh, as a school leader, because I had a lot of school leaders who were interviewing, I'm going to tell you, this is very relevant to what I'm looking for. Brother, did you know how to also cite this outcome, this learning outcome, please? And he's like, I know that. Tell me the outcome. You knew the outcome? You didn't know when to put it in? Bruh, I didn't know. And so having that mentorship is important because the brothers they want to put the work in. The sisters is doing it. And so I know this is going to take care of it. But the brothers just need a little bit of help in certain spaces that go into the ego thing. And as long as you show up and you big and black, then you cool with me. Nah. We can raise the standards because brothers want to meet it.
That's right.
So I just updated my real quick, 10 seconds. Yeah. I just updated my resume. My name is no longer on my resume. It says Black Lives Matters. So you already know what you're getting in the interview process.
Right.
What a check going though? Who getting a check though? BML getting a check?
Speaking of checks.
Listen, linking the check. Somebody changed their name to World Be Free and other things. So it could be a thing. Like,
Ocho Cinco? Oh, you know Ocho Cinco now?
A liberation leader, right?
I support that.
Are y'all going to start a whole new way of?
I know.
So I think you all pivoted to something. We have some really great audience questions, and I'm excited to dig into some of those. I know we're not going to be able to get into them. I also know that there were probably some nuggets within this that people's questions were answered. But one of the things that is important is money. And, in the work that I do and working with either new leaders or existing school leaders, both from the charter board side, but also from the work that I do at the Charter Collaborative, money matters, right? And so, this question was posed to you, Reef. As you develop partnerships to support your 12-year mission to build a sustainable pipeline of Black male educators, what skills and resources beyond money, but we know that money is the foundation of all of that, what else do you need to do that work effectively?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. And yeah, money is that, people who say money doesn't matter, the folks are sitting on a whole lot of it. They're the only ones in the world that say money doesn't matter, like they come up off it. No, well, I think in addition to, just the financial support, I think it's always been in community, building community partnerships in order to do that. Right now, we've reached out because we need our community's support across the country. Right now, we are looking to hire 50 Black and brown high school students, 50 college students and 75 high school students who are interested in teaching. And so this is a paid teacher apprenticeship. And so it's one thing for me to just put it on Facebook and things like that. Those are like bubbles. What we need are actually ambassadors and champions in different communities that children trust. And you can say like, hey, have you ever considered teaching? Be an astronaut, be whatever. But the studies show that 30% of our youth are interested in teaching. They're open to teaching, right? But they rarely have a, exposure beyond being a student. And so what we want to do is formalize that experience. And so please share, on our webpage, the Center for Black Educator Development, there's Academies page where students can sign up, high school and college students who are interested in this, educational activism, and they can sign up. So that's just one small example of the support that we need from our community members, including those who've joined us for this conversation because it's important to you. So please share that with potential activists if they are open to teaching whatsoever. And we have year-round programming, but sharing it, championing it, and at least have the conversation. And when we were at the fellowship, when we started this organization, 17 Black men, none of us had been approached to consider becoming a teacher until after we graduated from college. So that's 17 Black men, master's degrees, they're PhDs, successful in the field, relatively good looking, the works. And we had not been approached to become a teacher. However, we asked our what are you doing? A lean back. We asked our colleagues, many of them white women, and they said that the average response was third grade, was when someone tapped them on the shoulder and invited them to at least consider the profession. Third grade for one group, after college graduation for another group. That's untenable. We have to bridge these conversations early on because our children are worthy of having, students, teachers who look like them.
That's right.
Yeah.
And think like them and have a shared socio-political commitments.
So thank you for that. There's another question here from the same person, but I think that this one is as important, if not more so. The Marcus Garvey School in South Central Los Angeles had been highly successful. In 1986, a qualitative study of the school found that continuity between school and community culture was a factor in their success. We know that that is important. My previous role was community engagement director for a very large CMO that had not done community engagement very well. The founder favored passionate community members who could be trained to teach over college graduates. Is that a practical approach as we think about the work in 2021? And I pose that to any of you all.
I mean, I would say if you think about, African Americans starting schools in this country, and we're going back, hundreds of years ago. On another conversation, we could talk about Julius Rosenwald schools and my connection, and people like John Chavis who started schools in the early 1800s in North Carolina. Schools always function as part of a community. Mm-hmm. Schools were part of a community, as was a church, and so we're in this new space where schools are not seen as part and parcel of the community. The teachers who teach at the school don't live in the community. That those who live in the community don't have full access to the school. This is a new phenomenon, and I think ahistoric to how schools were created, generations ago, when school leaders were connected to historically Black colleges, and they came back and taught in the school, and you had this sort of cycle, which is really the model of the Rosenwald School, because there was always an HBCU closely connected to it. And so can we? Absolutely. Once you have, again, that term continuity, when I say we brought in fraternities and other groups, 100 Black men, concerned Black men into the communities, they were there as soon as you called them. But in many ways, they were waiting for the call. Now, someone said, well, Curtis, how come they're not lining up to get into the school? If you sit down and have a conversation, they would say, yeah, we did a couple of years ago, right, and it didn't work out. And a lot of times, they got their hands smacked and they said, I'm cool. But that could have been 2 or 3 leaders ago. But if you want to understand that the community in which your students are functioning has to be part of your professional development, has to be part of the curriculum, has to be part of everything that you do, because otherwise you're asking these students to come into a building and really tuck in and police a lot of the mannerisms, a lot of the things that they value, a lot of the things that allow them to navigate their community, and say that that's not relevant to what's happening in this space. And so you create a disconnect as soon as you say that, versus, you know what, we're going to bring that into this space, and I'm going to do a better job of incorporating what you value and how you have to walk through this space and how you show up outside of this building into the school. And I think you'd be surprised, but it has to be thoughtful. It has to be, continuous, but also has to be, communities have to have a voice, because when they leave that school building after school, on the weekends, in the summers, you have to have community. It's kind of reinforcing a lot of the values that you hold for and that you reward kids and punish kids for in the school building. It has to be a continuous conversation with the community, and understanding that the child at the center of all this and their future, but you have to understand what the environment they grow up in and affirm that, not challenge it as soon as they walk in the door.
That's right. Yeah. Now, I'm just really quickly going to wrap us up because we don't have much time left. I know that trying to be in conference mode when you're virtual makes it more difficult. So I'm going to share all of our Twitter handles so that if folks want to get in contact with us, they can. So I'll start with Sharif El-Mekki. He can be found at SELMEKKI. Sharif is active on Twitter because he and Ray go back and forth all the time. So if you also follow 8 Black Hands, you can connect with both Ray and Reef. Ray can be found at Mr_Ankrum. Curtis, his name, so at Curtis Every Day. I am Naomi Shelton. I can be found at Naomi Shelton, DC, the District of Columbia, where we do not have state rights, but we still get taxed by the federal government. And so I want to just really quickly whip around. If you could give me your 30-second closing thoughts, fellas. You have been amazing in the work that you do every day, but today you really showed up, and I'm excited about the gems that are littered throughout this entire conversation. But Ray, give us your 30-second spiel. Close us out.
Sure. So it's really important for Black and brown students to have Black and brown men in the classroom that look like them. Currently, we're at a deficit in terms of there only being about 1.8% of the total population of teachers as Black males. We got to do what we got to do in order to increase that, but not without quality. Focusing on the quality, but definitely there needs to be increased effort in order for us to increase the amount of Black male educators in classrooms across the United States.
Thanks, Ray. Curtis.
No, thank you. Thank you to Ed Choice and to South by Southwest. Black men show up every day in our communities, and they are teaching everywhere right now, in their homes, in their communities, online, and students are learning that way. And students don't divorce themselves from the spaces in which they learn. They understand that learning is happening whether we call it learning or not. And so Real Men Teach, our goal is to really highlight men in the community who are doing amazing work, who are teaching in different capacities, because as we celebrate the idea of teaching, you will start planting seeds in young people to want to stand up in their community and become teachers as well. And so what we talk about is we can recruit and retain male educators of color, but we have to first reimage what it means to be a male educator, but also reinvest. And so at realmenteach.com, we go about really ensuring that we invest in young people so that money is not a obstacle for them getting into the classroom, and ensuring that every child has a teacher in front of them that looks just like them.
Awesome. And then let's go ahead and close out with you, Reef.
Yeah, no, thanks again. The Ed Choice community, Naomi, great job with hosting as always. Appreciate you. I would end with a brief shout out to Charlie Cobb, Black man who was an activist, and he ended up stopping in Mississippi and joining SNCC and Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And as he was doing the work of activism and getting people to be, get them registered to vote, he decided, what about the children? What about the grandchildren of the people who are voters? They are not being served as in their schools. And so he came up with this concept of freedom schools. And that continues to, we build on his legacy all the way to today. So shout out to all the educators, Black men, as well as the Black women who supported them, guided them, and taught them. Chances are they had a dope Black woman teacher who guided them in. Yvonne Savior was my new teacher coach who taught me how to teach. And while we're talking about this today, Caroline LeCount in the Black Educator Hall of Fame was a Philadelphian in the 1880s, was demanding more Black teachers and supporting Black men to become principals. So just shout out to everybody doing the work. Hope to see you all, continuously in this space, fighting for what's just, fighting for what's right.
Hey, Nate, I'm the only person that took 30 seconds.
Yeah, listen, thank you, Ray.
I timed you. You
Shout
were.
out Ed
That's the
Choice.
best thing you've done all day. I want to, thank Ed Choice for the opportunity to have this conversation. 2, I would like to wish everyone a happy Women's History Month. I know that we have a panel full of men, but all of the work benefits all of us. And so thank you all, fellas, for the work that you do every day to pour into students, men and young women every day. And thank you all for tuning in and joining us. I wish we were in person. Hopefully education will get us closer to that, because we will have people that are thoughtful and not trying to cause division. So have a great evening, everyone. I wish we were going to happy hour, but we are not. Thanks so much.